Oh, it's gonna be a good night. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Thursday book launch. We have already had way too much fun in the prequel to the actual event. I'm super excited tonight. I've been looking forward to this all week. We have Greg Lobas that we get to celebrate with today, and I have put a link so that you can get his book, Left of Center. It was the 20th annual Dogfish Head Poetry Prize winner. Just to give you a few details about Greg, if you're not already familiar, we're glad to call him a North Carolinian, even if you aren't, Greg. Thank you now. Greg Lobas has been widely published as both an outdoor writer and a poet. His book, Left of Center, won the 2022 Dogfish Head Poetry Prize and placed second in the Delaware State Press Association Awards. His poetry and his writing in general has appeared in a lot of different magazines, including Outdoor Life, Tar River Review, Ekphrastic Review, and Broad River Review, and Kakalak, just to name a few. He has won the Marjorie E. Peters Award and the Peter Pan Award from the Poetry Society of South Carolina. He is second in 3-generation string of firefighters, attaining the rank of captain, and he lives with his wife, Meg and Sophie, the dog, in the foothills of North Carolina. I'm so glad you're here, Greg, and I'm going to turn it over to who connected us, who I'm so grateful for. I've got you, Donna.
Okay. Well, I met Greg when he was teaching at the local community college, and he had a lot of poetry readings, around the Columbus, North Carolina, Tryon area. I know him as a contemplative person. He has been instrumental in helping me with my poetry, and he's really great at picking titles. He's able to just pick up on them. But I want to read an excerpt from one of his poems that kind of tells you everything you need to know about Greg. And it's in the first poem in his book, which is a wonderful book. He says he's a firefighter. I live in my district. These are my people. They are not much, and as easily as not, they can piss you off. But they are mine, and I love them. Enjoy his poetry.
There you go. Yeah.
So thank you everyone for coming. I have a lot of thank yous. It's been mentioned before that poetry doesn't happen in a vacuum. Malika, thank you for doing this. And you're one of those people who's not only committed to your poetry, but you're committed to other people's poetry. And that is, I think, a noble thing. I think it's really nice. And I appreciate it. And I'm sure we all appreciate that. Donna, I've always admired your work. I really enjoy, I wish you could be in my class again. You can't, but be that as it may, thank you for connecting us. And we have, well, how long? Maybe 3 or 4 years we were in class together. Yeah. It was nice. I really enjoyed that class. So Karen Jackson, Ken Chamley, and Kathleen Colby. We have this Western North Carolina little poetry consortium, and they've weighed in on a number of these poems. And especially, I don't know if Kathleen's here today. I don't think she is, but she read the entire manuscript before I sent it in. So the book comes from my 30 years as a firefighter. I was a firefighter and paramedic in Ohio. It won the Dogfish Head Poetry Prize, which I actually wrote the book intending it to go into Press 53's immersion series. And it was a finalist there. And then they got back to me and said, the emotion is not carried through in all the poems. So that forced me to take a close look at it. And I made a lot of changes. One of the reasons that I think that this book won the award is the architecture of the book itself. There are 4 threads that run through the book. If we name them A, B, C, and D, if you read the book from beginning to end, you'll go A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, back and forth between 2 threads, and then it'll transfer over to C, and it'll go C, 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 and then back to A, B, A, B, A, B, and then you'll come to D, 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 D. etc. And then it goes back to A-B. This creates some pacing, and some of the stuff is tough, and it gives the reader a little relief, so that they're not constantly dealing with some of the heavier issues that the book deals with. I think there's almost a small micro genre of reality poetry. Is that Stacy Nigli? I can't say her name. Nigliziano, an ER nurse. There's Mike Jenkins, another emergency room nurse. I wish I had written his name down, but there's a fellow who wrote about his experiences in Iraq. It's the title of the book is called Here Bullet. And in fact, this book has been compared to his. What I'd like to do tonight is take you on a journey. That's what the book does. It opens up a world that most people don't experience. So I'm going to go ahead and read that first poem because I feel like it sets the tone for the book. The book does have some war stories, but it's also a book about compassion. Compassion that's extended, sometimes compassion that's withheld, the results of compassion, the results of lack of compassion. So I'm going to read the first poem, and then I know I spoke with you, Malika, or emailed about some of the rough language, but honestly, I think I'm going to pass on that because there's another sequence that I want to read, and it has to do with my time that I went down and helped in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. So I'm going to read the first poem, and then I'm going to read the Hurricane Katrina series without interruption. There's like 6 poems. I'm just going to go one to the other and go through that whole sequence. So the first poem, the opening poem, is called 0730, 6 Degrees of Separation. Before the day springs open, like a jack in the box playing heavy metal, I like to walk past the slats and spaces in the picket fence on Harnagy Street, where 7-story oaks shelter tiny front yards. I feel the modest thrum and bustle of commerce on the loose, the rumble of a distant freight train, a meditation of pavement. I keep track of tender efforts at landscaping, petunias to lift the working class neighborhood above its station, like children playing dress up. People step out of their dreams, screen doors slamming. They fill up with the morning light of their expectations. Some step blindly into cloudbursts that change their lives forever. I got hugged once walking into work, right there at French and Prospect. I walked up behind a woman sobbing so hard her body shuddered as if an 18-wheeler rolled through her ribcage. Sorrows like that should wait at least until noon. I asked her what the matter was, and she blurted out the early morning fire that tore through her sister's home, killing both her kids. The sudden horror was too much to compass sitting still, so the woman walked her grief out on the street. She clung tight to me when I told her I fought that fire. My pager jolted me awake at 4 a.m. My best friend, Dan, helped pull the children from the 2nd-story window, little smudged Raggedy Ann and Andy. We had done every futile thing we could. I just cleaned up and was walking in to start my regular shift. She held me close. Perhaps some essence of her darlings clung to me, like the smoke I couldn't quite wash out of my hair. I held her, too, trying my best to transmit what she longed for, so she would know that in a world where the traffic carries on all the same, her small deaths mattered. At the station, we washed stacks of dirty fire hose. Guys rehashed the 4 a.m. events in tones of cool adrenaline. I watched the char swirl down the floor drain and thought about the woman who walked the aimless walk of the stricken and poured herself out upon a stranger. Degrees of separation erased by fire, death, and pavement. I live in my district. These are my people. They are not much, and as easily as not, they can piss you off. But they are mine, and I love them.
Wow. Oh, my.
So I'm going to take the liberty of reading. That poem was picked up by Vox Populi, which I was real happy about. And this one was too. It's called Her Animal Self. Her animal self hit the brakes so hard, it almost set her back in time. A minute would do, even a few seconds, just before the van rocketed over the rise, launched into her subcompact like a Scud missile. Now she is a rabbit in a trap, straining against dash, frame, steering column, crumpled around her, pinning her, knuckling her like a fist. Spray of coolant, oil, gasoline, vapors in the night, smashed engines, evening catharsis. And everywhere the fire truck's idle growl. Voices shout over jaws of life roar, bending metal, generator floodlights. By the time we pry her loose, she is ready to be gentled. In the shelter of Squad 1, I kneel next to her, take her fingers, bend them down slightly, almost as if I'm about to kiss her hand. She curls her fingers around mine, squeezes, looks hopeful. She thinks I'm offering comfort, but I'm only stabilizing the dorsal veins of her hand in order to start an IV. And I wonder if she is embarrassed when I break free of her grasp, adjust the drip rate, check her vitals. She doesn't know how badly she is hurt, can't see the splinted leg, can't feel it yet. At the ER, nurses rip our splint away, raptors diving in. A blaze of merciless trauma room lighting makes everything artlessly naked. She sees now that frilly dresses and dancing are the smoke of memories. Hanging by a shred of flesh next to the silky, glistening club of her ankle joint is a dangling puppet of a foot without the strings. She screams and screams, her animal self waving her crazy leg crazily in the air. Her panic boils over, spilling onto everyone in the room like a food blender without a lid. Nurses lunge, miss, lunge again. Still she screams, still she waves, while I stand off to the side, wishing I had held her hand. One of the challenges of writing this book was there's a lot of information that needs to be conveyed, and they're pretty narrative poems. So how do you do that and keep it as poetry instead of having it kind of devolve into prose? It wasn't easy, but I think I did it. But that was always in my mind as I was going through this. You know, I'm not writing prose, I'm writing poetry. And another thing that was a little challenging was that it deals with jargon that people aren't ordinarily accustomed to. So how do I put that out there without saying that's what this means, that's what this means? Honestly, if I could do it again, I might put a glossary of terms in the back. Another thing I would have done is I would have changed the title. Donna, you said I'm good at titles. Left of center carries so much baggage, so much, right, left, political baggage, and that's what people's minds go through. And it took 10 years to write this, and it wasn't that emotionally charged when I started writing it. If I could do it again, I would change it to driving left of center. So in this sequence about Hurricane Katrina, I want to let you know about something. This is called an X code. It's something that urban search and rescue teams will spray paint on vacant buildings that they've searched. The top quadrant would indicate the date. the quadrant, the AFD SQ1 would, in this case, I just made this up, would indicate Asheville Fire Department Squad 1. So it'd be the unit that did the search. The GL on the other side would indicate a gas leak. So that quadrant is for hazards that are found. And the quadrant at the bottom would be any bodies, live victims or deceased victims. 1 dB would indicate 1 dead body. So with that in mind, let's take a little drive down to the Gulf Coast for Hurricane Katrina. The whole sequence is entitled For Katrina. And this is No Mindless Storm. She walks the streets of Pensacola with her hips and her haughty stare. She licks her lips like a hungry cat, flicks her hair, cocks her shoulder, walks the streets of Mobile and Gulfport, the streets of Biloxi, Baton Rouge. She opens them up, exposes them, fillets them like fish, and leaves their guts in a heap on the street. She is the very whore of Babylon, draped upon New Orleans, lounging on the divan of her boudoir. She takes inside her the seed of Delta, coast, and countryside, the seed of men, villages, cities, leaves them limp and forlorn. She births black mold, shattered glass, animal madness. She laughs as her children hordes scuttle along the edge of pulsing flames, suckles them on bottles of liquor, feeds them flat screens, and they rejoice at the wind. The firefighters of Hattiesburg. Greco, he loves a good disaster, loves it for its purpose, loves it for its presence, loves the sheer size of it. Tells me, we need to get down there, bro. Tells me he knows someone who can get us in at Hattiesburg fire. Says it's 90 miles inland and they still got hammered. Says we'll run with them for a couple of days. Come on, man, let's do it. They need the help. I wonder what Greco needs. We meet her south out of Memphis like a monstrous Kardashian. She does what she wants. A cosmic reality show. Back home, we watched her acolytes lean into their microphones, windbreakers snapping, street signs waving mad gestures in the background. Now, faced with her terrible presence, she raises the hair on our arms at the Mississippi border in the tangle of power lines, a pine forest snapped to bristles like wooden soldiers lying dead, all in the same direction. We don't really know her yet, not from the inside of my pickup truck on Highway 55, all the convoys of pumpers and heavy rescue squads on the freeways, and the black helicopters circling the sky above are not enough to take her in. The whole of humanity, on the scale of a satellite image, perhaps can do it. But one person, one family, one group of people small enough to share the same serving of dismay, they don't know the mole on her backside. In Hattiesburg, the firefighters are abraded like knuckles scraped on concrete, battered in her passing, battered in her aftermath. They took this job when they were young, took it because they were young, but she has beaten the young right out of them until they lean heavy on their elbows. They gripe to us because we know the bitter coffee of grinding days and relentless nights, how you can earn a year's salary in a single 24-hour shift. They are California dreaming, where the pay is good. It's bullshit here, they say, but they do it anyway. They don their wet gear and slog to another call. They gather their resolve like the defiant survivor scrawl, red spray paint on the clapboard wall of a flooded house facing the freeway, like a billboard. Katrina, go home. The chief sends us on our way, Greco and me. Not that they don't want the help, the firefighters of Hattiesburg, but Cincinnati Fire will shore them up soon with a crew of 20. Go to Gulfport, the chief says. It's worse there. Go to Gulfport. Man cries. Gulfport? Gulfport doesn't even exist anymore. The air is still charged with the memory of lightning, salt, silt, the odor of rot. Creates a world of dangerous expectations. MPs flanked by jeeps with mounted 50 cal machine guns sign crisp hand signals, restrict entry to buildings that stare like corpses strewn behind mountains of rubble, eviscerated guts of a city, not so much as a window to cover their hollow eyes, X codes tattooed to their foreheads, the grim gangland graffiti of urban search and rescue teams from Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis, marking their turf. Bodies live, bodies dead, hazards found. Cadaver dogs at play, macabre carnival. City Hall survives on life support, engine roaring generators. The coordinator of volunteers needs a shave, needs some sleep. And although it's just Greco and me who stand before him unannounced and unexpected at 2300, not much more to offer than our turnout gear and our willingness to get dirty. He chokes back tears to hear how far we've come to touch their desperation. The midnight air is close and hot. Ensconced in my tent, the white noise of the generator is loud as the hurricane that brought us here. My last waking thought is about the stifled tears of a grown man, the last drop of anguish that Katrina wrenched out of him when he laid eyes on us. Was it hope or despair? A girl laughs. Daylight seeps through the black bayou waters where they send us out to recon people who lumber out from shacks like the fevered undead as our convoy shudders to a halt on their block. National Guard, citizen soldiers like worker bees stack bottled water and MREs on street corners from the backs of camouflage trucks. They form mountain ranges of gently used garments next to other mountain ranges of gently used garments from previous convoys. No handshakes, no hugs, no touching at all. For the locals live in the rumored filth of their own typhoid and cholera. But America loves them just the same and sends them used clothing for 100 lifetimes. One little girl rises up from the black water squalor to wonder where we are from. Maybe she never heard the clipped tones of a Yankee before. I tease her, tell her I bet her name is Katrina. Bye-bye, little Katrina. She laughs me into her memory. I laugh her into mine. Spirits dance. Night is the dark of the muddy Gulf water cast into the sky. Katrina's breath heavy upon us as we swig cheap wine and swap stories around the post-apocalyptic campfire on 14th Street. No shortage of firewood. We burn remnants of a shoe shop, law and realty offices. We sit beside a brick wall circled around the flickering light and speak about Katrina in hushed tones, afraid, it seems, that she might hear and rise up out of the Gulf once again, snatch us and drag us all to the bottom with her. Ghosts dance, shadowy on the brick wall, indigenous spirits, woolly and painted, wolf-like, volcanic, intemperate, dancing spirits from 10 million campfires over 10 million years. The first wine, first ferment, we pour it out and drink it in the firelight. Northbound I-55. We see FDNY southbound, trucks by the score, stunning in their Big Apple bombast, flashers blazing for 1,500 miles, the real deal, riding direct from the Twin Towers to the rescue of New Orleans, like the U.S. Cavalry. Wow, This is going to hurt their response time stats, Greco laughs. Greco, joyful and triumphant, his face radiant in the cathartic blessing of Katrina. These guys will come, integrate into the command structure, spray their own urban search and rescue X codes on the foreheads of lifeless buildings. One of them will see a 30-foot yacht wedged into a Burger King drive-through and realize this is no mindless storm. They will not own her. She will own them. They will be absorbed into Katrina, and then, like the rest of us, they will be glad to head home. Of course, they wouldn't notice us, the New York guys. But if I could get their attention, I would tell them how me and Greco didn't spray paint any X codes or save one single soul. But we did give ear to the bitching of our weary brothers in Hattiesburg. We made a man with a clipboard cry in the ruination of what was called Gulfport. We made a little girl laugh in a no-name slack-water hamlet, a dead place she called home. I don't know how much time I have. Like
I'm going to say, keep going.
Yes, keep going.
Okay, I'll lighten it up a little bit. This one's called Marcia of a Thousand Sunshines. Strangers stand in the post office like points on a line that never actually touch. We shuffle our feet, keep our hands to ourselves, our thoughts unipolar, internal, contained, the first dimension, existence. In the second dimension, we become tax forms, commemorative stamps, shipping labels, small print, two-dimensional effusion of rectangles, bulletins, notices, large block headings, a flat and tedious world festooned on the post office walls. We are one with our surroundings. Next dimension, the third, introduces movement. A clerk calls out, "Next." A man, the perforated cardboard one, approaches and transitions out of himself. They pore over postage, weight, and the disposition of boxes and envelopes. I wait my turn until I am next, but I decline and let the woman dressed like a fee schedule go ahead because I want to see the other clerk. Marcia of a Thousand Sunshines, the fourth dimension, recognition. Marcia saves her biggest postal clerk smile of the day for me over our intersecting memories. Mine of bouncing in the back of Squad 1, her body limp and rolling with the curves, a desperate search for her broken, fibrillating heart, hitting it hard with an electric hammer. Hers of going through doors and doors and doors to a place where all journeys lead, and then returning. Fifth dimension, gratitude. Marcia sends Pat, Riley, and me a flood of Valentines, cookies on her birthdays, anniversaries of her reanimation. It was never enough for her. But when a life of gratitude became a burden, I gave her permission to bury her thanks in her mended heart, water it, let it grow into something else. In the sixth dimension, possibility, Marcia wears rose-colored glasses to see the way things really are. They help her find her mother after 40 years an orphan, help her find her way onto Oprah. They open up her world. In the seventh dimension, transformation, I step outside the post office. A breeze touches my cheek. A small part of the sky has come down to caress me. I smile at the first person I meet, channeling the sun like Marcia does. But it's as if I am looking at a child who doesn't know any better, for he seems contained, like a point ready to take its place in line. he bears the importance of a no loitering sign. So if it's, I'll do one more if you have the time. I don't want to eat it.
Yes, please. That's perfect.
Okay. So this is another storm poem. But whenever I read from the book, I always like to end with this one. It's called Fire Truck at the End of the World. The air tonight smells of prophecy. Invisible fingers of ozone, lightning strikes, emanations of wet soil from dark places, 4 horsemen riding through the ferment of a thunderstorm, then galloping off to trouble high points east of the city, a tantrum of downed trees and wires in their wake. Sirens call out omens in the streets, fire trucks spinning red comets through leaden-eyed neighborhoods, like the culmination of all things. The power is out and darkness reigns, but for an electric blue, high voltage sun vaporizing concrete, consuming West 5th Street with a monstrous amplified hum that shakes the marrow. It lights up the buildings from below, like holding a flashlight beneath your face and smiling like the devil. One drunk guy from the Oriole Cafe trundles through the chaos because he just wants to go to bed. I caution him not to pass our fire scene tape. The electric sun might find him, might reach right through the wet earth or lash at him like a whip as he walks by. But he is sure he'll be fine and he'll take his chances. What I don't tell him, though, is that if his teeth break from the force of his clenched jaws, his spine arches and snaps, his hair crinkles up, and the soles of his shoes begin to smoke, we will sit in the cab of engine 1 and watch, because we won't be able to help him, and there is no one else to call. Everyone knows there is a reckoning to be had. It's written in blue shadows behind our eyes, scrolled in whorls of blackbirds winging in the fall. When the fabric is rent and the dark matter of the world behind the world spills out like coffee beans from a burlap sack, at the end, the very end, when everyone is locked down and shuttered in, fire trucks will roll through the streets and we will be the first to see it coming. So thank you very much. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share the book with you all.
Greg, I couldn't be more honored that you were here. And I know people have questions. I definitely do. And I can say, I really understand why the comparison between you and Brian Turner and his book, Here Bullet. Because yeah, I mean, when you see the chat section, you're going to have a lot of fun because so many of us put the same phrases where things were resonating. Feel free to go ahead and unmute. Yeah, absolutely moving is what Pua Ali'i just wrote. If you want to ask a question of Greg, or if you just want to sing praises like I feel like doing right now. I thought when you said you would change the title, I can see now, why you would think of that. But I did want to talk about how you spoke of ordering the book. There's something in the meticulousness which you craft your poems that is really amazing and beautiful to me. They're powerful, hard, difficult poems, and yet the way that you phrase everything, the way that the words speak to each other and how exact you draw up these images is impressive. And I just have to ask, what is your editing process like? Is that something you're consciously bringing to your poems?
Most of the poems are written in my head before they ever go on paper. And they're revised and revised and revised mentally. I know they tell you don't do that, just put it on paper and then go. I never do that. I'm always thinking about the poems and I'm always working it, and then eventually I'll put it on paper, but most of it's done in my head. So yeah, I'm sorry.
I said I do that too.
Okay. I mean, that's how I do it. And these this book was 10 years in the making. I originally didn't have that architecture, the A, B, A, B, A, B.
Mhm.
And then a friend of mine, you all know Lee Stockdale, some of you would know Lee. He suggested, why don't you alternate them? Because the B section is a series of poems that don't necessarily hang by themselves. They have to be in connection with the other poems to make sense. I originally wrote it as one long epic story, and then I felt like that's too much. That's asking too much of the reader. Break it up and give them some relief. Step away from it from time to time, because it's kind of a dark story, that the story of a particular day at work that was unusually hard. So that's why I did that. And then I think oddly enough, the Katrina thing, and then the other thread, which is called Old School, which is kind of a tribute to one of the more colorful characters at the fire department, kind of takes the reader away from all that, and then gives them a break, and then they get back into it.
I think
Yeah,
what
that fascinated me. Go ahead.
yeah, I think what I liked most about what you were saying was just that humanity of it, right? The touching, the tenderness of caring for others in such a displaced moment in time, something that is so prevalent for many people across at different times, and to know that you have someone who says, hey, no matter what, I'm going to come and be there. And one of the things I noticed was when you talked about the woman, you and the lady hugging and then walking with her, I heard that theme in different ways, and sometimes even with another hug. And so it just really moved me, the way that you were describing such events that, in America, we don't really talk about those really horrible things. We call them horrible, and then we move the fuck on. Yeah. Instead of like, let me sit with this. These are real people, real human beings, And so when we broaden our shoulders to be able to have this conversation that you just had with us today, I thank you.
Thank you. That's a good point.
Lee, I was thinking of the phrase "deep reverence for life" kept coming to mind when you were reading, Greg. It was just it was a sincere, deep reverence, and I really love that. That was something that echoed, and I think that's kind of what you were saying as well.
That was a great point that poor Ali made. This book is such a wonderful counter to the overused trite phrase, thoughts and prayers. You hear that so often. This is real action, and this is real compassion. And I've never heard Greg read these poems any better, man. It was great. Kudos.
Thank you, Ken.
The kind of compassion that is willing to carry the weight of self-discipline and like being aware of everything, because that's your job and you have to parse it all and make decisions in real time. And yet you have to not let yourself be overwhelmed because there's people to take care of. It's wonderful. And I have a friend who's a firefighter who I'm going to get this book for, because I think they would value it a lot.
Firefighters are not known for their poetic sensibilities, but the ones who have read it have been really struck by it. And that means a lot to me. I'm very proud of it whenever a firefighter tells me, I really liked your book.
Greg, who did the cover for this?
When I was at the fire department, there was a photographer that started following us around. We gave him a pager, and if we had an incident, he would show up and just take photos. The photo on the front is one that he took. It's actually a training session. It was a propane emergency training session. So that's a propane fire and a crew that's dressed in the propane fire in a training session. His name is Ken McCarthy. He's acknowledged in the book, I think. I'm sure he is.
Yeah. Well, the first poem had me. I mean, in the words from Jerry Maguire, you had me at hello. I wanted to read this poem to a group of poets, and I couldn't read it at the beginning because it was so emotional, and so real. And that's what I'd say about your book. It's real. And it's a life that a lot of us don't know anything about. So I really appreciate the book, and I appreciate you, Greg.
Thank you, Donna. I appreciate that.
Ron, you jump on in. Ron, you had a question?
Yes. Greg, I really enjoyed your reading very much. And I was struck by the differences in styles. There were poems, almost whole poems, like at the beginning, and the one that Donna kind of cited at the beginning. And then there were others that had, more attention to language, kind of with threads of lyricism being woven through. And when I hear that kind of stuff, I get the feeling that the voice that's talking to me is coming from the poem rather than the poet. That you have learned that the poem is more important than you. And I get that feeling very strongly, that you can just begin to discover the voice of the poem and go with that voice in that poem, and there might be a different voice in another poem.
I think that's a really good point. Some of them have a very different tone. And to me, if they're all the same narrative tone, then it gets a little bit mundane and difficult to read. So I was glad that some of them carried a little different feel to them.
And it's the same way in your book, Greg. The form that you're using in these poems is very different. It's not the same thing carried all the way through. I found the form and the format of the poems very interesting. I mean, very interesting.
Yeah, that Marsh of a Thousand Sunshines is
Yeah.
visually on the page.
Yeah.
It does more than just what you can do by reading,
Yeah. Yeah.
Could you hold that up to the camera?
Sure.
Thank you.
So it goes over several pages. There's the first, well, let's see here. Where's Marcia? That's the first page. I don't know if you can even see that. Too bright. There we go. That's the first page. And then the next couple of pages look like this.
Mm.
So each of the dimensions that are mentioned has a little bit different visual arrangement for them.
And marbles, Greg.
Yeah, I wanted to start at the left margin with it and then kind of move slowly over to the right margin in the course of going through these 7 dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Thank you so much.
Greg, I would also like to ask, how much of the inspiration for these poems kind of occurred to you? Maybe you just jotted something down in a little notebook on site, or how many came in retrospect after the fact?
All of them in retrospect. There are things that stay with you over the years, and I picked out things that carried an emotional charge. And there were other things I could put in, but I don't want to keep putting the same emotion over and over. So I picked out a few that I thought were representative of that sort of emotional cost, if you will. So really all this was in retrospect. I didn't make notes or keep anything while I was actually working. I never wrote poetry till I retired from the fire department.
Wow.
I used to write outdoor articles. Once I retired from the fire department, I shifted gears and I started writing poetry.
I think you were probably one of the people that kind of kept the power company from taking property and running lines through our area.
I was very much involved in that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to add that one of my favorite poems is one about rescuing a child in a tree, the cat and the child, and So there are such different tones and different poems and different scenes. It's a fantastic book. It really is.
Thank you, Karen.
Just a reminder, I'm putting a link in where you can buy it. But Greg, if someone did want to have you inscribe something, could they reach out to you for that?
Yeah, yeah, that would be great. If
Okay.
they contact me on my email, I have a website, but it's not quite up yet. But if they contact me by email, they'll save some money, and I'll be happy to give them an inscription.
And you're on.
May I put your email address in the chat
Yeah,
section?
yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Somebody had a question?
Hey, it's Elizabeth Wilson. I was hoping that you could speak a little bit more about what you said in the beginning about, what you would do now if you had it to do over again.
If I could do this book over again,
I was hoping you could speak about specifically about putting a glossary in. You were mentioning
yeah,
specific
yeah.
terms, and so I'm kind of struggling with a similar issue with that, using terms related to my illness.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been wanting to use the appropriate terms.
Yeah.
And the feedback that I'm getting constantly is that it doesn't matter that, okay, so a specific example is I'm using the word cataplexy, and cataplexy can be described as, loss of muscle tone, sometimes complete paralysis. But I'm specifically using the word cataplexy, and the feedback I'm getting is don't use that word. Nobody knows it. Nobody will understand it. And you've described it well enough. And I wanted to know your take.
Well, you as the writer, words matter, right? And if it's important to you that word be in there, I think you should put it in. And if there's a lot of technical jargon that appears in your book, or like there's some in this book, yeah, go ahead and why not make a little glossary and direct the reader, to the glossary. Maybe at a note to the reader in the beginning, a glossary of terms appears in the back of the book, something like that.
Do you think that in retrospect, do you think that would have been beneficial for you?
I do. I kind of wish I had done that. Yeah.
William Stafford says there's such a thing as being insultingly clear.
Yeah.
I love that line.
But I'd also like to stress the other part of it too. When I'm reading, I have a dictionary and I use it, right? So that's what I love about authors who just follow their soul, right? Because there's a branch for learning for me. And so that means I can go look the word up. And I actually like that. That's part of climbing through someone else's story without them having to, kind of give all this context around everything.
There's nothing wrong with challenging the reader a little bit, right? You don't want to make it so onerous that it's no longer enjoyable to read, but it's nothing wrong with challenging them somewhat, right?
Definitely. Well, this has been a fabulous discussion, guys. I deeply appreciate all the different angles that people are bringing up, and thank you, Greg, for your answers, and also for the reading that kind of really inspired this discussion. Any other questions? I've checked the chat section. I think I've covered everything. Kim, you wanted to ask, is there a way to create a poetic glossary early on in the sequence? Was that kind of covered?
No, I'm just throwing that out to Elizabeth, that maybe she could play around with, titling a poem with that word.
I thought the same thing.
And starting with what's, you know, a straightforward definition, but then riffing off it poetically and seeing if early on in your sequence you can have some fun teaching the reader what these things are through your lens.
So you're talking about just, you know, creating poems with the names,
Like
with
maybe that word is the name of the poem, and you go on, and it's almost like you're writing a dictionary definition, but then you spin off of that.
Yeah, for this particular thing I'm thinking about it, that won't work. It's just a part of a larger
Mhm.
poem. But thanks for the suggestion. I'm gonna be thinking about all this. Thank you
Sure,
for
good
bringing
luck.
it up.
I think that's one of the reasons why it's so lovely to have these opportunities to talk to one another, and support each other in our efforts of really honing our craft and putting that beautiful soul out there into words, and shared experiences. You know, yes, that I liked what you said about the I think you called it micro genre of kind of these reality in but you know, I think that there's universal things in all of that. And so it related to so much of it and had a personal tie to Katrina because I lived in New Orleans for many years and had relatives there and people that were stranded in hospitals and also clients that were in the stadium and so it was powerful to hear you know, your experiences and it kept harkening back to those college students that had drove down to the stadium with um water, you know, and they had seen it on TV and their first response was to get into the car and drive and I just I think there's something beautiful about that reverence for life and that shared humanity and I appreciate your presence and your poems speaking to all that. It was just really an honor.
Thanks for sharing that, Malika.
And we are ready for open mic. And I have a list. If I have neglected you, you'll have to say something to me at some point. I will come to you, Cal, and I'm not going to spotlight because it always takes me a moment to do that. So if y'all can bear with doing it that way, it'll work well. Thanks, Cal.
All right. I may have to go shortly after I read, but we'll see how that comes out. This is my book cover. I'm always happy to show that because it's backwards. It's by my 7 grandchildren. And this one is also a poem about work. And I have poems related to people that I've worked with over the years. And this is a guy who was foreman in the carpenter shop of a paper mill in Maine. And it's called Portrait 1, Leo Cody. Now there is a man at the mill, one Leo Cote, who makes dowels in the carpenter shop. Not an old man, though he has made dowels here for 33 years. He left school, Leo did, was expelled at 15 and went to work at the mill, his only recourse. And year after year, he has walked down Cumberland Street at 7 in the morning. You know, he said, I've been working in this same room now for 33 years. 33 years, and it don't seem like a long time. You know, I count my fingers every morning when I punch in on that clock. And every day I count them again when I punch out. If the count's the same both times, it's been a good day. Leo, the great cheater, the great liar, they say the great schemer, horse player, boozer, and informer for the revenuers. Leo used to have to run home, hat pulled down over his eyes, so the bootleggers wouldn't recognize him. Yet, once, twice, maybe more times, they almost shot him dead. 33 years in the same room. Leo looked soberly off into a wall, contemplating the years, history, the men who came and went, and the shady deals. Their wives. Leo nods, suppressing a smile of pride. Thank you.
Thank you, Cal. Shamala wrote, if it counts the same both times in the morning and the afternoon or evening, it's a good day. It's true. Catherine, whenever you're ready.
Okay. And thank you, Gary. I'm looking forward to reading your book. I wrote this quite a while ago, and it was after I visited my daughter, my oldest daughter, and my ex-husband. They're quite close and they live in the same area. We used to have an antique shop when we were married that was a lot of fun. So an antique festival was going on in town, and he wanted to take us both to it. And we had fun, and afterwards, this poem came to me because I noticed some changes in him, but also in me. So the title is X. Gentle old soul you have become, far from your days of liquor and fun, days when enraged we battled, in lust we loved, impassioned to travel, with thumbs in the air, to places of serenity, just you and me, wild and free. Now we are older, having gone in different ways, with differing expectations of life. Now, weathered by stress and achievements, failures and successes, peace is what obsesses in our minds, remembering times from long ago.
Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
I always love our open mic. I'm coming to you, Ken, when you're ready. I'll remember to unmute. Thank you.
Thank you. With great respect and admiration for Greg's book and those poems, I'm going to offer one that's about fire and about a storm and about extremes. Test fire. What would you burn to stay warm when it's 10 below and the wind chill 20 beyond that? To keep your family from freezing when snow humps to the transom, police and fire trucks founder in historic drifts, and cell phones refuse all touch. Your casual stash of firewood goes the first afternoon, then magazines, scavenged junk mail. Everyone rips and crumples, but loose paper isn't warmth. Wear socks as mittens, you tell. Keep that toboggan cap on. Next comes replaceables, wicker baskets, wooden blinds, and bifold doors. A bawdy novel spread-leafed on the grate flaunts more smoke than flame, so you stomp cracked bookcases against the hearth. There's been no word. Nothing is pushed down your street. End tables and nightstands buy you a fifth night. Now a grim party of putty knives and screwdrivers scours with an air of immolation. Yes to chair rail and ceiling fan blades. No to baseboards and window trim. The white chuff of each child's breath dooms the dining room chairs. And you're okay with it. It feels good, this power of loss, how the whole house tempers as it burns.
Oh, Ken, that first question of what would you burn? And I know that it said to stay warm, but I had a whole list. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen with a K, jump on in.
Okay. Rose. At the close of prayers for my mother, her caregiver Rose did not say amen or shalom or so be it. Instead, she spoke healing into being. God has done it, God is doing it, and God will do it. uttering those words with a fateful joy like Noah, hungry for land and witnessing his first rainbow. Her alto lilt invoked an ancient spell over whatever lamentation or burden was at hand, spiraled time like a water sprinkler soaking the ground. Whenever I heard Rose's petition and watched her lay hands on my mother, their warmth easing back pain, restoring sight, I lost track of whether God was working in the future, present, or past. I can't explain how, but when Rose spoke, I lifted through space to visit ancestors who sang cradle songs. On my way home, peering into the lives of those I love. My daughter, 3 years old, combing a doll's wiry hair. Janet grieving her stillborn twins. A priest palming his rosary beads. On one of those trips, I even saw my mother, entombed in her bed, release her soul as Rose intoned those ageless words that spun the world and keep it spinning.
Gorgeous, Karen. Remember, everybody, after you've read that, there oftentimes there's comments in the chat section. I don't want you to miss them. Hua Ali'i.
Hello. This one's called She's Danced on the Rails. Sliding along, peering into endless windows, some blown out by former inhabitants, some repaired by the new ones. Coveted entry into a society made to order. We order our drinks, our cheeseburgers or pies, cheering the homemade blue cheese, eclipsing the wedge salad, the main course. A terrible hunger, roaring like a wave, distinct and seeking, a sweet hum of them around every tree. The entwined hands basking along pathways leading to each other. We meet over and over again. Our internal daughters, those triplets and sextuplets, given all the attention and compassion to spark their lives and loves. One eating the muddy, dank earth, one feeling the sensation of moss carpets, the other swinging on vines, calling our mother, who, by the way, is all of us rolled into one. The mothers, the aunts, the grandmothers, the ancient sisters who are the gods that wake me with whispers and whistles to me, for me to follow. She pulls out the pocket knife to teach me to carve, to sculpt, anything I might imagine. There are endless lands to discover, millions of languages to speak, many fires to stoke, keeping home and hearth of warmth and beacon. I can find you when I look into the sun, space the moon. How far is of no concern, only that I have direction and inflection. An explorer who loves my once black hair, my once black, now gray wild hair, with many a scar, rich laughter, spending a millennium resting when needed, while pondering the footprints of my existence.
Thank you.
Yes.
That is gorgeous. I have Karen with a C.
All right. This is Pausing the Walk for a Poem. What few chartreuse-rimmed deep green leaves have not been deer destroyed fan out their tiny fists of Big Bang pink to offer the white, four-pointed stars of winter blooming daphne blossoms up to the clear blue eye of sky this morning. I can almost sense their scent wafting through the fussy chatter of tuxedoed chickadees, urging, scatter some seed about before word gets out to the squirrels that you are here.
Oh,
That's awesome.
Yes.
That is gorgeous. Okay, Ron, and then I have Julian after that. Unmute Ron.
Of course, sorry. All right, I lost my poem. There it is, up there. So my poem is called The Whelk, W-H-E-L-K, and there's two kinds of whelk. It's cone shaped, but this one's about one of the curvy whelks. All right, that sounds like a family name, the Curvy Welks. The Welk, deep in the rattling riptide, the hurly-burly beachhead, the caterwauling cauldron, as turbulent as time, the Welk washes shoreward through the shell-scrubbing spume, the frothy latte of living things, and lolls at last in the sabbing sand and breeze. The sun denudes her lacy leg, sleeks her calcy crust, warms her curvy flank and foreleg, and there you sit, shell at your foot, the gastropods the gods have sent you for your troubles. A 20-year turbulence, a torment of a marriage riptide heaving daily. You stroke the whelk's thigh, calf, neat turn of ankle, smooth as lambskin now, and it's coming clear to you. Some things lose their sex appeal with age, others just getting started. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. That's awesome. Hey, and last but not least, Julian.
Okay. This is called Zapper. Sorry, I need to do something old men do. Zapper. Something grunted in the field towards Lillington. Waking, you learned it was feral hogs. But then, with your butt on the ground, arms and hands inside the VW engine compartment, changing a fan belt, and oh yes, your head as you jerked and the lid of it cold cocked you. Later, when you woke, you thought of the bug zapper you passed each night on your way home, triggered into lightning by passing insects. Thought how the sound of it split the air, wondered if that sound was the last thought of the electrocuted. Back in the office you shared at Fort Bragg, in your sleeping bag on the floor, you said an Our Father for the young soldier who picked you up. He had volunteered 3 tours in Vietnam, wanted to go back. Did he want to try again to get it right? Was he hooked on the whole violence of it? Violence you couldn't imagine? Or was he playing a grisly game, Russian roulette writ large on the napalm jungles of his memory and their little people? Couldn't get the mangled bodies out of his dreams, dreamed his own mangled body laid on that roadside, legs splayed out under rear end of that damn Carmen Kia.
Oh, Julian, fabulous. And again, I want to remind people to look into the chat section, Napalm Jungles of His Memory. Thank you all so much for being great company. Greg, thank you for
Yes,
letting
Greg,
us
thank you.
celebrate with
Thank
you.
you, everybody. It was very nice. I
And
appreciate it.
just a
Thank
reminder
you.
that I just put Greg's email in there again. So if you wanted to request a autographed copy, go ahead and quickly cut and paste, copy paste. All right, guys, be well.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye.